First thing I noticed about Kethor Station was that nobody looked at the workers in the gray tunics. Not a glance. Not even the reflexive flicker you give a person moving through your peripheral vision. The station's population, merchants, transit officials, cord brokers in their layered sashes, moved around the gray tuniced workers the way water moves around stones. Efficient. Absolute. Like they had trained themselves out of a reflex the rest of the galaxy still had. I'd been stranded on Kethor for 9 hours by the time I understood why. Cargo pod had been routed here by a clerical fault 2 relay stations back, and the Vethani Transit Authority had my vessel's registration flag, locked pending a document review that, I was told, resolve in 3 to 7 standard days, possibly more, possibly less. The official who told me this wore 6 looped from his left shoulder to his collar, braided fibers in copper and green, each one apparently marking something about his rank and his lineage and his professional standing. He'd looked at the single thin cord I wore on my transit visitor lanyard, the way a man looks at a child's drawing of a house. I found the workers' canteen on level 4 because it was the only place selling something I recognized as food at a price I could pay. Long tables, bad lighting, the smell of something being fried in oil that had been used too many times. I bought a bowl of whatever they were serving and sat down. She was at the far end of the table, gray tunic. No cord at all, not on her shoulder, not at her collar, not even the visitor's lanyard they'd given me. She was working on something small with her hands. A maintenance coupling of some kind, turning it over and looking at the threading. Her copper gold skin caught the canteen's overhead light in a way that made the faint striping along jaw look almost silver. Long dark hair, pulled back. Silver eyes that moved over the coupling with the focused patience of someone who'd been working on the same problem for a long time. The table around her, maybe 6 seats in each direction, was empty. I didn't think much about it. I sat down 2 seats away because the rest of the canteen was more crowded and I wanted room for my bowl. She looked up. The look was quick and carefully neutral. The kind of expression that's been practiced into place, that sits in the muscles of the face not from ease but from long habit. Then she looked back at the coupling. "That a pressure fitting?" I asked. She went still. I pointed at the coupling. "The threading looks like a pressure line fitting. We use something similar on the cargo harnesses. Beat of silence, 2 beats. She looked up again, and this time the neutrality cracked just slightly at the edges. Not into warmth, not yet. Into something closer to confusion. Like I'd spoken in a language she knew but hadn't expected to hear here. "It is," she said. Vethani was crisp and precise, the kind of diction that came from education. "The secondary coolant line on Junction 7 has been stripping its seal every 4 shifts. Placement fittings they send are machined slightly undersize." "So you're shimming it?" "I've been shimming it. Shim wears faster than the fitting lasts." She turned it over again. "I'm trying to understand why." I looked at it. "I'm not a mechanic, but I've spent 20 years on cargo vessels, and there is a universal grammar to things that are machined wrong. Is the line itself vibrating, like a harmonic from the ventilation system?" She looked at me for a long moment. "Yes." "Then your shim's not the problem. The vibration's eating the seal. You'd want a damper on the line upstream, or the fitting's just going to keep losing contact." Another silence. This one was different. She was looking at the coupling with a different quality of attention. Not at the surface of the problem now, but at the layer underneath it. "I hadn't considered the line itself," she said. "It's a cargo thing, vibration mapping. We spend a lot of time on it." I went back to my food. "I'm Davin. I'm stuck here for a few days, routing fault." She didn't answer immediately. When she did, voice was careful and quiet. "Sarath." I nodded. "Nice to meet you, Sarath." The canteen, I noticed then, had gone somewhat quieter than it had been. Not dramatically, not the silence of a scene in a story, just a low settling, the way a room changes when something unexpected happens, and people try to observe it without appearing to observe it. I didn't understand why. I went back to eating. The explanation came from the transit clerk I'd been assigned to, a young Vethani man named Pelin, who wore 4 cords and seemed earnest and mortified in roughly equal measure. He found me the next morning outside the visitor block. "Person you spoke to in the canteen," he said. "At the maintenance table." "Sarath, yes." He looked pained. "She wears no cord. I looked at him. I noticed. Then you understand, he stopped. He could see from my face that I didn't understand. He took a breath. Kethor, on any Vethani station, a person without a cord has no rank standing, no legal standing. They are considered. They are not recognized as interacting with them as though they are a full. He stopped again. He was struggling with how to explain this to someone for whom it was apparently incomprehensible. It is a social infraction, he said finally. Engage with them as though they are a full person. It causes difficulty. For who? For you, for the social order. Inspector Orvath has noted the incident. I thought about the woman turning that coupling over in the bad canteen light, practiced neutrality in her face, the 6 seats of empty table on either side of her. What did she do, I asked, to lose the cord? Pellin hesitated. A debt dispute, her family's trade license. The tribunal has not yet ruled. Until it rules, her cord is held in registry. He looked uncomfortable. It is a temporary status, usually. And while the tribunal is pending, she works maintenance on level 4. She works wherever she is assigned. He paused. She was a cord holder of the 4th rank. Before, I thought about that. 4th rank. Trans officials who'd processed my documentation yesterday had worn 6 cords and looked at me like I was a problem to be managed. Frank meant something. It meant education and standing and the right to be looked at. Inspector Orvath would prefer, Pellin said, that you not engage with her further. Inspector Orvath, I said, can note that in my file too. Pellin looked at me for a moment, and then he did something I wouldn't fully understand until later. He looked, briefly, relieved, like a man who'd been asked to deliver an unpleasant message and was glad it hadn't landed. I went back to the canteen. She was there, at the same seat, same table, same 6 seats of empty space on either side. I sat down 2 seats away again, put my tray down. She looked up, and the practiced neutrality was there. But behind it now there was something watchful and wary, like an animal that has been still for a long time and is calculating whether it needs to move. Damper, I said, upstream on the coolant line. Did it work? A beat. I haven't had access to the parts storage yet. I've submitted the requisition. How long does that usually take? The gray section? A small pause that had no humor in it. It depends on who else has submitted. I nodded. I ate some of my food. She worked on something else now. A panel connector, its housing cracked along one edge. Where are you from? I asked. She looked at me. This time, the look was not neutral and not wary. It was something closer to searching, like she was trying to find the angle of the question, the thing underneath it that would make it make sense. I'm asking because I don't know anyone here, and I have 5 days to fill, I said. I'm from Marek's Landing. Cargo surveyor. I've been doing this run for 11 years and I have never once been routed to a Vethani hub by accident. I have excellent opinions about it. The corner of her mouth moved, not quite a smile. The muscles got partway there and then reconsidered, but it was something. Tevet province, she said. In the southern cord terries, my family trades in precision instruments. Or we did. A pause. We do. The tribunal hasn't ruled yet. Precision instruments, I said. That's why you know what's wrong with the fitting. My father would be horrified to know I'm working on coolant lines. She said it quietly, and there was grief in it that she was trying to keep at arm's length by keeping her voice level. What's your father's name? She looked at me again. Why? Because you mentioned him. Because that's how conversations work. A longer pause. Keveth, she said. Keveth of the Sereth Line Courthouse. He sounds like a man who knows his fittings. And there, finally, the smile came through. Small, brief, tired at the edges, but real. He would accept that as a compliment, she said. Inspector Orvath found me on the 3rd day. He was a thin Vethani man, with 8 cords looped from shoulder to collar, which I'd gathered by now was a significant number. He stood in the corridor outside the canteen like someone who had made sure to be standing there before I arrived what he had. You are aware, he said, of the protocols regarding interaction with cordless persons. I've been told there are some. Then you understand that continued violation creates a formal record, one that travels with your transit registration. I looked at him. He had the face of a man who had spent a long time being precise about the application of rules he found personally satisfying. Her tribunal, I said. When does it rule? That is not a matter. I know it's not a matter for me. I'm asking. He looked at me with the particular contempt that people who understand a hierarchy reserve for people who refuse to learn it. The standard period is extended when the disputed party lacks court standing to file expediting documentation, he said, with the smooth cadence of a man reciting a rule he had never once questioned. It can extend considerably. So she can't speed up her own tribunal because she doesn't have the standing that the tribunal would restore. That is how the process works. I looked at him for a long moment. Thank you, I said. That's very clear. He hadn't expected gratitude. He watched me walk away, with the expression of a man who suspects he's been insulted, but can't locate where. On the fourth day, I went to the registry hall. It took me 2 hours to find the right office, and another hour to explain to 3 different clerks what I wanted. The concept of a human witness of character, a formal document in which a third party attests to a person's standing, submitted to a civil registry, did not exist in their filing system. There was no form for it. No category for it. I asked for a general submission form instead. The clerk gave me one, the way you give a child a piece of paper to keep them busy. I wrote it out in standard trade tongue, which the registry was required by multi-species transit law to accept. Full name: Sarath of Tevath Province, Courthouse of Kevath, Occupation: Cision Instrument Trade, Character Witness, Davin Marsh, Cargo Surveyor, Marrick's Landing, registration number on file. I attested that I had known Sarath on Kethor Station, that she had conducted herself with expertise and dignity and good judgment, and that her account of her circumstances was consistent with a person of standing unfairly reduced by a procedural delay. I signed it. I paid the general submission fee, which was small and clearly intended for documents the system expected to quietly lose. Put it in the submission tray, and I went back to the visitor block. I found out later what happened. Pellin told me, 2 days after my routing issue cleared and my pod was ready. He told me with the particular expression of someone who has witnessed something they don't have a category for and haven't yet decided if it was wonderful or terrifying. The registry hall had no mechanism to process my document. It had no mechanism to reject it either. By multi-species transit law, a general submission in trade tongue to a civil registry could not simply be discarded. It had to be logged to the public record while the hall determined its category. The public record in a Vithani transit hub is visible to all cord holders. Sarath's brother had been on Kethor for 2 days, working through the cord registry offices, trying to find any avenue to accelerate his sister's tribunal. He saw the document on the public board. Pellin told me what Sev had said when he saw it. He'd stood at the registry board for a long time, long enough that the clerks began to watch him. Then he'd turned around and walked to the inquiry desk, and he'd said, very quietly, with the kind of voice that a person uses when they are holding something large and fragile very carefully. That document, the human filed that for my sister. The clerk had confirmed it, and Sev had said, still quietly, still with that careful steadiness. Then he saw her when we couldn't reach her. Pellin said the tribunal expedited 3 days later. He wasn't certain whether it was the document or the attention it had drawn, or the fact that Inspector Orvath suddenly found himself the subject of a registry audit on his handling of cord suspension cases. Probably all 3, he thought. Sarath had her cord restored the week after I got home. I know because she filed a message to my cargo registration. 3 sentences. She told me the tribunal had ruled. She told me her father sent his regards to a man who understood precision fittings. And she told me that on Kethor there was now, filed in the civil registry under general submissions, document in a category that had not previously existed. They'd had to create a name for it, which translated roughly, feet as witnessed personhood. I read it twice. Then I put it in the good folder, where I keep the things that mattered. She was a 4th rank cord holder, with a father who knew his instruments, and a brother who loved her. She'd been invisible on that station for 4 months before I sat down. I hadn't known the rules. I still don't think much of them. Where I come from, you ask people their name. That's just how it starts.